Hello and welcome to the Glamptuary podcast, where we talk about the experiential outdoor hospitality industry and glamping. I'm your host, Bobby Marsden. Okay, we are off and running in season 2. If you've been following Jesse's path, you're getting more familiar with him. Now we're going to switch gears to Etienne in episode 3. Now, in the first episode, again, it was a brief introduction to Etienne, the Airbnb contest, why she wants to open up her farm and share it with the world. In episode 3, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into who Etienne is. Where did she come from? Why does she want to do this? Why is this so important to her? And why should it be important to you? So, sit back, relax, and enjoy episode 3 with Etienne White and Heartsong Farm. Hello, Etienne.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. And I have a lot more questions for you, I think more about you, because I realized there's a lot of things that our viewers don't know about you. And I think there's probably a lot of things I don't know about you. And so before we get into the physical location of where you are and what you're building eventually, for people to come and see and share with you, I just want to know more about you. I hear the accent. I heard it the first time we met. And so why don't we start there? Tell us where you're originally from, where you were born, what brought you to the United States, and then take us all the way through to how you ended up at this farm.
Gosh, well, that's compressing a lot of years, so I'll try as best I can to answer that for you. I tell everyone I grew up in London, England. I actually spent the first 5-6 years of my life in the countryside, right outside of London. So, running wild and free across fields and I can remember rolling down a hill of poppies and just being out in nature, which was great. And then, of course, London was a big change. But as a kid, I didn't really, I didn't have an opinion on it. It was just, it was what it was. It's your reality. But I do remember in my 20s being back in London after university, working and climbing sometimes to the tallest hill. Like I'd climb to Primrose Hill in North London. I was always searching to see where the land met the sky, a kind of uninterrupted version of a horizon line. And you're just down with all of the tall buildings around you and all of the concrete around you every day. And I craved being in places where the land met the sky. That didn't mean that I wanted to be in the Midwest of the US farming. That was not necessarily what it meant at that time. But I was busy working in London and I had a job in a great advertising agency. And I actually got offered a 2-year stint in the US in their Minneapolis headquarters. And so I took that and, I told my family and my friends, I was like, I'm only doing it for 2 years. I'll get it on my resume, get it on my CV, and then I'll be right back. And of course, what happened was I ended up falling in love with the Midwest. Certainly love the US in general, but the Midwest specifically has a very different culture to it than the sort of the coastal places. And something about that really resonated with me. And I found myself being based in Minneapolis. It was much easier to get out to green spaces on the weekend. There wasn't sort of 4 hours of traffic and, an hour away, you could be canoeing down a river on your weekends. And I really loved that. And then through my professional life and my personal life, some things kind of came together where I became much more aware of environmental sustainability and concerns that we were facing. And so I made a career decision to take the marketing skills that I'd learned from being in advertising and marketing and put them to good in the nonprofit world. And so I made a move to work for a global nonprofit focused around forests and keeping forests as forests. And while I did that, I found myself being invited to stages all around the world to give speeches and talks and presentations and helping companies. And I realized that I didn't want to talk about sustainability. I didn't want to preach it and pontificate about it without also practicing it in some way. And so that's what led me to buying my first farm. And then I got the farming bug. So as I said, I had a life change where I was, divorcing. And in that divorcing, everything opens up. Lots of people getting divorced these days and there's lots of downsides. It can be really hard. But the beautiful thing about it is that you get to think to yourself, okay, what's my do-over? How do I want to live? What is, if I'm not being happy in this way, what does happiness look like? What are the very conscious and mindful choices that I want to make about how I live my life? Sometimes life just kind of happens around us, and the beautiful thing, certainly for me anyway, with this divorce was that it gave me a chance to decide how I wanted to rebuild what I wanted my future to look like. And I knew that farming had to be a part of it. And so, so I fell in love with this driftless area that I've told you about before. And I started my farm and started raising my children here. And one last thing I would say then too, the other sort of consideration, I didn't just have the farming bug, for me, when I'm outside, it's like, I don't know if it's like a Prozac or like an upper or the effect, the buzz I'd get from champagne. I don't really know. I don't need anything else. I just doing what I'm doing, even if it's in the winter, hauling hay out to sheep, breaking frozen water in the water buckets and stuff. There's a calmness, there's a serenity, there's something that comes over me. And I knew too that I wanted to raise my children in nature. And so farming was the selfish thing for me because I knew it would help me and ground me. But I also knew that my wish for my children was for them to grow up connected in nature, to never have to crave seeing that where the land meets the sky or feeling that they were crowded out of it. And really, it's strange, but I kind of did think of this consciously at the time. Nature is a co-parent for my kids. I'm parenting them solo. It's just me. My family is abroad. And I knew that being able to run wild and free barefoot through the fields and playing in the streams was going to be a really important part of their childhood. And in a way, it's kind of like Mother Nature got to co-parent them with me. So yeah, that's my spiel. That's my story.
That's awesome. And it sounds, obviously, you're going to be sharing this experience, with your children. Mm-hmm. And now you have this opportunity to share it with the rest of the world.
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of had a hunch that for us, this was the right thing to do. This was a great way to live, being immersed in nature, foraging, living with the seasons. And then the more that I'm doing in my professional work, where I'm looking at, statistics around loneliness, disconnection, mental health issues. And then obviously we're living in the climate crisis now. It's not some far off thing that's going to affect future generations. It's here and now, and it's affecting all of us. And I'm realizing that other people can really benefit from being immersed in nature, being closer to where their food comes from, finding out about local farmers, other artisans that are working to provide great food, great experiences, and a great sort of culture. And so it's exciting to me, super exciting, that Airbnb is allowing me to now explore and offer that to others.
That's awesome. Well, I think in the next episode, we're definitely going to want to dive into that whole Airbnb thing, because to me, a contest being held by an organization so big, I just want to know more about why they did it and what it's all about. And how much money did you get? What are they expecting of you? There's so many questions. So we'll dive into that in the next episode.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Etienne. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, so we know a little bit more about Etienne. We know she's from England. That's a big thing. We know why she's doing this. That's another big thing. Now it's time to talk about the what. And one of the first big things I want to know is what is going on with this Airbnb contest? What is that all about? So we're going to dive into all that in the next episode. To follow along with Etienne and Jesse, you can do so on www.glamptuary.com, where you can access the podcast both in video and audio form. And if you'd like to follow along on other podcast platforms, you can do so on Apple, on Stitcher, and on Pandora. We're on a bunch of platforms, so we don't care how you follow. We just ask that you follow. So until next episode, safe travels. Thanks for joining.